Americans are more sick than ever, and they're being so affected by what they're eating and what they're drinking. Now we've created a food system that's poisoning our people and also all the people that we're importing our stuff to. We spray 280 billion pounds of glyphosate a year on American crops. If we continue down this path of spraying all these chemicals on our food, we will only have 55 years left before we have no more plantable soil, period, end of story. There are 10 companies that own the entirety of our food system. Nestle, Kraft, General Mills, Unilever, Mondelez, and there's a couple of other ones that I'm forgetting, but essentially there's 10 big conglomerates that essentially own every single food company that feeds us. You are setting up your children for a life of wellness or illness, and you have the responsibility to make sure that you set them up for wellness.
Have you ever wondered if the food you eat daily does more harm than good? What if behind every meal lies a hidden agenda controlled by a corrupt food industry? Chronic illnesses are on the rise, and the root cause might be closer to your plate than you think. A handful of powerful corporations dominate the global food industry, prioritizing profits over your health. It's a system designed to keep us dependent, but it's time to change that. Courtney Swan is an integrative nutritionist, an advocate for holistic nutrition and real food living. She is an influencer and the host of the Real Foodology podcast. She is a vocal advocate for exposing the dark realities of the food industry. In this video, we will expose the history of the broken food system, share the harmful chemicals that are poisoning our food supply, reveal the corrupt system that perpetuates this problem, expose the companies that are profiting off of your avoidable chronic health problems, how and where to shop for healthy food, and what steps you can take to protect yourself.
Because we've manipulated our food in so many different ways. It started with the way that we were processing our flour, and also it started with like heirloom seeds. So basically what we've been doing is we've been hybridizing our seeds so much to the point where our ancestors probably wouldn't recognize these seeds and this food that we're creating now because it's so different from what we were eating back in the day. Now, I'm not actually necessarily against hybridization. What I'm more concerned about is something called genetically modifying. And we started releasing genetically modified foods into our food supply around the 1990s. And that, to me, and according to the experts in the data, is really where things started to get really tricky.
Our food system wasn't always like this. Once farms were small scale and sustainable. Over time, industrialized agriculture took over, introducing chemicals like glyphosate, an herbicide hailed as a breakthrough, but now linked to serious health concerns. Genetic modification followed, promising to revolutionize farming while quietly altering what we eat. Crops like BT corn, engineered to produce their own pesticide, became widespread. Government subsidies for these monoculture crops ensured their dominance, sidelining healthier, natural alternatives. The result? A food supply drenched in chemicals and stripped of its nutritional value.
So during World War II, the Nazis were using a chemical in their nerve agents and in the gas chambers. And there was a chemical company called IG Farben. IG Farben has since been dissolved, and now it's Bayer. That's like the big company, the agrochemical company. IG Farben created these chemicals, and then shortly afterwards, Monsanto created Agent Orange. When these wars were over, because they were using Agent Orange in the Vietnam War, when these wars ended, these agrochemical companies needed a place to use their chemicals. They were classified as insecticides, herbicides, and pesticides, these chemicals they were using. So they knew that they could use them against pests, but they also knew that they caused major damage to humans, and they were using them in these wars to cause damage. So after the wars ended, they went from having, this whole market for their chemicals to essentially nothing. So what they did is they pivoted to American farmlands, and they started a war on the bugs and pests on American farmlands. Bayer has since bought Monsanto. Monsanto was the biggest producer of something called glyphosate, which has the same chemical compounds as Agent Orange and some of the nerve agents. Bayer bought Monsanto in 2018 because Monsanto started really getting under fire thanks to people like Vani Hari. So Vani Hari was one of the first people that really started sounding the alarm on this because she was
Food babe.
Yep, food babe. Because she was saying, why are we spraying all these chemicals on our crops that we're then feeding Americans? We're spraying these. We spray 280 billion pounds of glyphosate a year on American crops. We know that they cause cancer. They are literally classified as a human carcinogen by the World Health Organization's IARC, International Agency Research on Cancer. So we know that these are causing cancer, and we're now spraying them on our food. And this is what we would call big agriculture. You asked me about big food earlier. This is what we call big agriculture.
Glyphosate is a chemical commonly used as a herbicide in modern agriculture, to control weeds and improve crop yields. Its widespread use has sparked debates about its safety, as some studies link it to serious health risks, including cancer. This has drawn attention to the practices of large agricultural and food corporations, often criticized for prioritizing production scale over health and environmental safety. Next in this video, Courtney explains how we've created a food system that is poisoning not only our people, but also all the people that were importing this stuff.
Farmers get taxpayer dollars paid to them from the government when they grow certain crops. Certain crops like corn, wheat, and soy. Those are probably the most heavily subsidized crops. So essentially farmers can get money from the government in order to help them grow these crops so that we can create enough to feed our people. But the problem with that is that we are mostly spending that on genetically modified crops. And what that means is essentially, so we talked about this patented seed earlier that Monsanto created. So they have created a couple different ones. One, they've created a seed where farmers can plant these crops and then they can spray the entire farmland with glyphosate, which is that chemical that I was talking about earlier. And it will kill off everything else, the bugs, the weeds, everything else but that actual crop, because they've made it resistant to glyphosate. Now, there's another seed that actually has something called Bt toxin in it. A lot of people maybe listening have heard of something called Bt corn. What that is it has this little Bt toxin in the actual seed. So we're eating this. If we're eating Bt corn, we're eating this little toxin. And we know that it's putting holes in the stomach lining of the insects. But the scientists and the experts around this are telling us that it's not affecting humans. And I call bull.
Governments pay farmers to grow certain crops like corn, wheat, and soy to ensure enough food for everyone. However, most of these crops are genetically modified, like Bt corn, which contains a toxin to kill pests. Farmers also use seeds designed to survive chemical sprays like glyphosate, which kills everything else in the field. These methods raise concerns about the chemicals entering our food. So why aren't these practices stopped?
There was actually a study done in France I'm probably going to get the year wrong, but I believe it was like maybe around 2017. And what this scientist found was that when he was feeding these rats genetically modified food, they were growing these crazy massive tumors. And this study got so much, it was everywhere, and it got so much attention that eventually the companies that were involved, like Monsanto, Bayer, they actually got that study to be taken down. And so they tried to discredit the scientist, but secretly they actually added it back in the medical journal like a couple years later because they found that it was actually true. These agrochemical companies, they have so much money and so much power and so much influence. They lobby in Washington. They make friends with politicians. They're funding the agriculture universities. So when these farmers are coming out of school, they're getting a skewed sense of what these GMOs actually do to the body and what they're actually doing to our soil, which is another thing we should also talk about because it's also driving excess climate in the atmosphere. You can't find any science right now, essentially, that's going against the GMOs. And the reason why is because I kind of already said this, but they're funding the research. They have so much money. And the problem is for research for this kind of stuff, like you have to have a lot of funding. So who's going to fund the research for this? It's going to be the big agrochemical companies that have the money because our government's not paying for this. And so they're hiding all the results that we're getting from the smaller studies that are showing that they have real effects on our body. Not to mention, at this point, like, when are we going to just admit that like common sense sometimes maybe overtakes some of these scientific studies? If we know that something causes cancer, if we know that something is making the stomachs of insects explode and we're consuming this and we're thinking that it doesn't have an effect on our bodies, at what point do we say, okay, screw the scientific studies? Like, we know that this is causing cancer already on people.
Big food industries are hard to stop because they have a lot of power and money. They influence laws by paying lobbyists, funding studies that support their products, and fighting back against stricter food safety rules. This makes it difficult for governments to hold them accountable and protect public health. Coming up in this video, it is important to read the labels on food products. Why is it so important?
And people don't even know that they've been snuck in and they're not trained to read the ingredient labels. So like you said, somebody thinks by giving their child a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that they're doing really well, but that bread has 15 grams of sugar in it, and then the jelly has another 15 grams, and then the peanut butter has another 10 grams, and all of a sudden you're at like 40 grams of sugar just for that one sandwich.
Courtney reveals one easy method to prevent almost any kind of chronic disease. Stay tuned because this secret to cure the chronic disease is very simple yet very effective.
Every chronic disease under the sun is preventable by simply losing weight. 9 out of 10 of the leading chronic diseases in this country right now could be prevented by diet and lifestyle in most cases. No, also just look at the obesity rates.
Right. There was one fat kid in class.
Yes.
That's it.
And we're not trying to be mean here. We're just stating the actual facts that we have to open our eyes and realize that this is not okay and this is not normal. Obesity is a sign and a symptom that something has gone wrong in your body, and it's not good.
Obesity is recognized as a root cause of chronic illnesses, with studies like the Global Burden of Disease study reporting that excess body weight contributes to 4 million deaths annually, driving conditions like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and certain cancers. Chemicals like glyphosate and other pesticides may contribute to obesity indirectly. Research suggests that exposure to certain environmental chemicals, known as obesogens, can interfere with hormonal regulation, metabolism, and gut health, which may increase the risk of obesity. So is there any solution to all this? Let's see what Courtney Swan suggests.
Okay, so there is an ongoing farming systems trial right now that has been going on for 40 years through the Rodale Institute. And what they're doing is they are farming conventional farmed agriculture crops next to organic. And what they have found time and time again in the last 40 years is that organic not only produces the same exact yield as when we use all the chemicals, in some cases it actually produces more.
Next, according to Courtney, buying groceries from local grocery stores isn't a good option because by the time they reach your home, the grocery is not fresh anymore. So what does she recommend in this case?
If you can find a farmer's market near you, that's absolutely the best, because what we need to be doing is getting back to buying locally grown produce, making friends with our farmers, knowing exactly what they're spraying, what practices they're using, like the regenerative farming, which, by the way, I want to say this really fast because this kind of like ties up the regenerative farming. So what's so special about when you protect that soil and you allow it to be healthy and do as nature intended, there's a natural process that happens in that where the soil is actually pulling the carbon out of the atmosphere. So when we have excess carbon, it's naturally going back into the soil because the carbon is actually food for those plants. And when we're feeding those plants with the carbon that it so desperately needs, the soil's healthier. And then as a result, our produce is healthier. It's going to be higher in vitamin and mineral content. Well, now they just passed recently that they're going to start introducing genetically modified wheat into our food system. And on top of that, if it's not organic wheat, like I said, is being sprayed to dry it out with glyphosate. And also, I remind people of this all the time too. Things like burgers, French fries, pizza, things that we have been trained to think that are just inherently bad for you, period, end of story. It's actually not true. I eat burgers, I eat pizza, I eat French fries, I make them at home. Or I go to places that I know, like for example, we had fries the other night and they were cooked in beef tallow. I make a lot of this stuff at home. So if I'm craving a burger, I'll do a grass-fed burger, maybe put some lettuce on it, a good heirloom tomato, get a gluten-free bun because I have to eat gluten-free. And then I make oven fries in the oven with avocado oil. Boom, there you go. You can still have all the things that you want. If you want pizza, just make it at home.
To sum it up, the food industry has evolved into a complex system that prioritizes profit over public health, leading to a surge in chronic diseases and environmental degradation. From the overuse of harmful chemicals like glyphosate to the domination of a few powerful corporations, it's evident that we need to take control of what we eat. Regenerative farming, buying local, and educating ourselves on what's really in our food are small but significant steps toward better health and a sustainable future. What do you think about the current state of the food industry? Have you taken any steps to make healthier food choices for you and your family? Let us know in the comments below. Remember, you are what you eat, so nurture your health and remember to take your daily dose of longevity seed for a vibrant life. If you found this content insightful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more eye-opening discussions. Let's work together for a healthier tomorrow.